So, when you're a teen or a preteen and your parents are supposed to have the talk with you, if you're a girl, then this is when your mom is going to tell you to expect to get your period and maybe introduce you to menstrual products. So I actually never got this talk, but I heard that it's a thing. I have friends and they all tell me they have to have this talk, and my parents never had this one. So luckily, I was about 15 when I got my period, which I think is on the late side from what I now know. But through a combination of sex ed at school and having friends that went through this stage, I realized what was happening, even though I didn't really know what to do about it, because they don't teach you that much in sex ed. They just teach you that this will be a stage in your life. And for some reason, my irrational teenage brain at the time felt really embarrassed and ashamed. And I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents or friends. And so I didn't have anybody really to ask questions or to answer my questions. And I would rummage through my mom's things, and I would steal her panty liners, which was actually the only thing that I was ever able to find other than tampons, which I was a little scared of. So then, being an athlete at the time, I was on the track team, I was on the swim team, and without knowing all the ways that hormones can affect your body and performance, I was annoyed that I would have to also deal with this extra uncontrollable, unpredictable, or seemingly unpredictable thing without any guidance. And so, if only this book was available back in the 90s. So hi and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. So today's book that I'll be presenting to you with my buddy Alan is a book called Girls Running, written by Melody Fairchild and Elizabeth Carey. And we're very happy to have the authors with us on the podcast today.
Okay, so I'll start with Elizabeth Carey. Elizabeth is a freelance writer, editor, and running coach based in Seattle, and has worked with Oregon State University and Syracuse University with their training with their cross-country and track teams. She's written for everybody in the running world that you could possibly imagine, including Trail Runner Magazine, Podium Runner, Die Runner's World, you name it, etc., etc. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello, thanks for having me.
And her co-author is probably somebody that the running world has seen in the past, Melody Fairchild. One of the fastest young schoolgirl runners on the planet at one stage in the 90s. Incredible college athlete, but also had some trouble with injuries and had some time off from running. When she returned to University of Oregon, she helped her team finish 5th in the NCAAs and also earned an All-American honor. After college, Melody went on to become a professional runner, was in 2 Olympic trials, the 10K and the marathon, has made the US World Track and Field Championship teams. In addition to success on trails and racing at mountain running championships as a master competitor. Both as an athlete and a coach, Melody's goal is to inspire people to get out there. She directs a year-round youth running program, coaches a women's training program, has founded girls' running camps, all with the aim of creating space for other people to develop and flourish in their own running journeys. And it's an absolute privilege to have you talking to us today, Melody.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
In terms of the book, just in general, I would say just laying out the book, it's given to us in 11 chapters, starting with topics mostly about physiology of running and changes that happen, particularly in girls' situations in terms of puberty, and focus on girls in particular. The middle of the book kind of changes to topics more towards psychology, what constitutes a winning mindset, how to raise fears. Later chapters about fueling and problems with potential eating and body issues. Chapter 10 is about team building, and 11 about gear. So we're going to go through as much of that as we can get through. But before getting into the book, I would probably ask you ladies the first obvious question, which is, how did you two meet? And what is the Melody Fairchild, Elizabeth Carey partnership?
Well, I was thinking about this today, actually anticipating you're asking us that. And I just always have to go back to my first memory of Elizabeth. I was a counselor at a running camp called Steens Mountain Running Camp in southeastern Oregon. And I think Elizabeth was a senior. You can correct me on that, but I got to be a coach of the tent that Elizabeth was in. But really, Elizabeth was the coach of the tent. I can still remember her yelling and leading her team up the road, and she would make these very wise and witty cracks about everything, really. Her wit was evident then. Just a super, kind of a powerhouse of a person. I'd never met anyone like her. It's being a coach of a tent at the camp. And that's where we originally met. And then it's kind of interesting time because I actually am sort of like, I'm like, wow, that's a long time ago. And, we just happened to be at a stage in our lives when it sounds like there's quite a difference in our ages because she was a camper and I was a coach or a counselor at the camp. But, we're colleagues, and it just was the stage of life we were in. Over the years, we would just keep crossing paths and sharing our passion for girls running and for the sport. And when Elizabeth came back as a coach herself, and I had moved on to a different role at the camp, at Steens Camp, we had conversations there about the book, and Elizabeth, having a dream to be a writer someday, mentioned about the idea of writing a book, and that was a long time ago, and here we are.
What year was that?
Circa, according to my old journals, either 2006 or 2007, when we first started really brainstorming. I found a list of titles that I had started thinking of after we talked, because we had this beautiful space at Steens Mountain Running Camp where Melody would give talks, and she had created this space for girls specifically. And that was really a key catalyst in our conversation and brainstorms for this book, because we knew there was a dire need for this information and inspiration for young athletes.
Tell us a bit more about the need in terms of what was the purpose of writing the book? What were you looking to achieve?
Yeah, do you want me to take that, Melody?
Sure.
Or do you want? Okay. So the book is a guide for young athletes, and we are speaking directly to middle and high school girls, but we think it can have a broader application, a broader audience. But we're speaking directly to those athletes because we want to empower them with information that we didn't have. I didn't have it as a collegiate athlete. Melody didn't have it as a collegiate athlete. Liz is talking about her experience with the period. There's across our sport and across our society, there's a gap and a hole of information, and simultaneously negative myths and taboos about women's bodies and girls' bodies and what their sport trajectory will look like. So we wanted to really bring those taboos into the light and give girls the information that they need to have a happy, healthy, successful running career. And if they so choose, that could be a lifetime career.
If I may say something too, Elizabeth, she's a pro. She has very good way of summing up things. She's like my twin. She can say something I would say in 3 paragraphs or an hour in 1 sentence. But I always go to, a friend of mine recently said, Marie Davis, who is doing Zoom meetings. She's Wildwood Running. She's doing Wildwood Running out in Portland now. she said last week when we were on their program, Melody feels all the feels. And I that's a very true statement. And so as Elizabeth was talking, I was thinking about the stories that I felt all the feels around, which led me to that year of 2007, where Elizabeth heard the girls talk that I started there and was like, okay, let's do something on a broader scale with this, which is so awesome. But I could just tell you really fast, I just remember being a Nike athlete when I earned myself a sponsorship out of college. I was lucky to run for 4 years for my living. And during that time, I got to go around to running camps. And everyone that I went to, I went as a guest speaker. I was just wanting to have space for girls to talk, and I would ask the camp director, can we do this? And I remember one time in particular at a camp on the East Coast, they had it on the schedule. They inserted a time for the girls to go somewhere and the boys to go somewhere on the schedule. And I remember being on a run and boys at the camp taunting the girls and making fun of the girls for having a special time to talk about girl stuff and that kind of thing. And it sounds benign, but it's not, because it contributes to that feeling of shame or needing to hide it. And it's such a great feeling to get this book out there and to take the lid off that. And Liz, I enjoyed just hearing your introduction, and you're just talking very naturally about pretty visceral things that women experience. I like the language you use. It's very refreshing. And I wanted, the one last thing about this is that what moved me that year in 2007 to start talking about these things with girls was really the underlying desire is for girls to have a happy, a joyful association with running. And we could go a lot of places with that. I'll just leave it at that. But that year, the intent was to find out actually what makes you happy. Because I had seen so much discontent and disappointment and disengagement because of these challenges that girls face, and they had nowhere to go to talk to. They had no one to talk to about it. It was not an open conversation. So we really hope that our book will inspire coaches all over the country, all over the world, to have a starting point to talk about these things with.
It's fantastic. We saw with I guess it was probably the New York Times expose and Mary Kane and the treatment that she underwent through the Nike Oregon project, highlighting really for everybody in a more public way that the difficulties with and the challenges and the inadequacies of the current environment. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. But there's a statement, but there's no solution. Mm-hmm. And what you ladies are doing here is trying to be part of the solution rather than stating the problem. You're trying to be part of the solution. I see that the book is geared obviously towards girls. It's called Girls Running. Deals with female matters, but just saying a bit for the male representation in the podcast. It was actually an enlightening book for me to read. In terms of to go, wow, I never went through a lot of this stuff and never had to experience a lot of this stuff, and probably would have had the attitude of the boys in the camp that you were referring to, Melody, because I wasn't informed. And in fact, a bit of information for guys there is useful.
Yeah, and Alan has 3 girls, just, FYI. So, for him to say that he learned something is really something. And like, I have to say, I mean, I really, when I read the book, I was just like, wow, imagine if this had been available in the 90s, because in the 90s you didn't have so much internet. There was no real place to ask anonymous questions to like anonymous people. Like now you can kind of go on the internet and Google stuff. Not that that's necessarily the right place to get information, but yeah, I and even now, even though, you know, like now nursing has kind of made me very comfortable talking about all kinds of bodily functions. And even my previous team that I was with, I think the girls were very, very open about, you know, talking about these kinds of things. I guess it probably helped that one of my previous teammates was also a nurse. So we would just go on these runs, and I guess the poor boys that were running with us, they just had to put up with it. But we would talk about periods and hormones and all kinds of stuff during those runs. But it's, you know, we also talked about other girls' experiences, girls that had been part of, you know, college teams and in other, you know, in other universities and other places, like girls that had the experience of being in a U.S. Running environment. And I heard stories of how toxic sometimes those environments could be. And you know, there's this one story that I heard that was like, the team basically, it was almost like a competition to see who could order the least for their pre-race meal. And they would go around the table, and you didn't want to be the last to order, because if you were the last to order, let's say the first person ordered Caesar salad, the next person would order Caesar salad with the dressing on the side, and then you'd get the last person, she was basically ordering lettuce. And I heard this story, and I was like, I was like, wow, you know, I consider myself kind of lucky, because I was sheltered from a lot of these kinds of things. Like I had never experienced that in running. I did have male coaches all the time. And yes, you know, I was embarrassed about all these things that had happened because no one talked about them. But on the other side, I didn't have this experience that I seem to hear about a lot. And I was wondering, like, what do you guys think? Like, how common is it for athletes? I mean, you're talking about endurance athletes who you know, really need energy, and you know, they need to, you know, be eating food, and that are, you know, limiting what they eat, and that have this kind of negative body image. I mean, how common is this really in your experience?
I can jump in there. Very common. We've all heard stories like that. As someone who ran at the collegiate level, and Melody did as well, that was one thing that we bonded over, were these horrific stories of toxic culture that was not just passed down from male coaches, it was female coaches as well, because there are these myths in running. Like we've all heard about racing weight. We all assume that physics and metabolism go hand in hand, and you think that lighter is faster. That is not always the case. And yet that myth is so pervasive that this holds true for males as well. Every runner has heard that. And I think that's a big part of people, even at the recreational level or adult level, not wanting to identify themselves as a runner because they feel like they don't fit this specific mold. It's insidious at all levels of our sport. And the stats bear it out as well in collegiate running and high school levels. If you look at the statistics, it's common, but we also know that it's underreported because there's stigma and shame around it, especially for men. And as we're learning more and more about this syndrome called relative energy deficiency in sport, and there's another paradigm, the female athlete triad, there's an organization that has coined it the male athlete triad, because we know that men also face serious consequences when they don't have adequate energy to support their growth, their daily life, and their training. And so this is something that affects all of us, but somehow the brunt of it, probably because we live in a society that minimizes women, you know, and bases their worth on appearance, which is patently unhelpful and harmful. But we know that, you know, a lot of female athletes have faced these pressures, and it's sad and scary. We want to stop it.
I really think that you all could have an entire year's worth of podcasts. If I don't know how you'd frame it, but or how you'd attract the women to tell the stories, but you get a group of women like me and Elizabeth around together, and it's like a group therapy session because the stories just start rolling. And that year in 2007, when there was something very special that happened in the community of Steens Mountain Running Camp where we were, because that year, for the first time in the that point, let me think, 13, so 33-year history of the camp, there were more girls than boys enrolled in the camp. Not many, but there were more, and there were more female coaches. It was really interesting, and there was this whole group of female coaches there, and we started talking, and it was very powerful. Yeah, so those stories you've heard, Liz, are yeah. I mean, there's just it's just an endless flow. Really, you really we couldn't even. It's hard to grasp like the levels to which that experience kind of it seeped down into the soil of women's running, and it produced some pretty toxic weeds. And we're trying to grow flourishing plants that are going to give off fruit and keep growing, keep the running race of women going, if you will. I mean, I met women years after I graduated from my university who were great. They were one of the greats of runners at the school, whose pain associated with their experience was so great, I get the chills saying it, that they decided long ago they did not want to even enter the city limits of the town, and they did not want to see the coach. I mean, it was that deep. And I remember the day this one woman who lived only 30 miles down the road and taught school, she came back. I was with her by her side, and it was just huge. So yeah, very, very, I just had heard so many stories like that. And I thought something's gotta be produced that's going to empower women and girls to, well, first of all, we just stop the problem. And that's where why this book could be powerful, just to simply educate girls and normalize what their experience is. So yeah.
I guess we see in particular in ladies that the collegiate level, the fantastic world-class juniors hardly ever translate to world-class seniors. So there's something missing in the transition there, it would seem.
Last year I was honored to be named the coach of the senior women's world cross country team in Denmark. And after my job was done, I joined the citizens race that they had on the world's toughest cross country course. And I was just gonna stay around, let all the team go back to the hotel and rest up, and I was gonna have some fun being a runner. And I did. And as I was finishing the race, this fabulous BBC, commentator said, Melody Fairchild just crossed the line. Once the fastest runner in the world for her age. And I just stopped in my tracks and cried. And I felt this sort of it was kind of like awesome and really hard to hear at the same time. Because, there's so many factors that contribute to why a young girl does not realize her potential. But, I actually, one of this book writing process, it was really hard, and I made it really hard on Elizabeth, I think. But now that we're on the other side and we're having a chance to talk about it, it just these conversations are bringing out some of the really meaningful things, that we can share to help change the story for girls. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, we noticed that at the end of every chapter, you have sort of little think exercises or writing prompts. What's the idea around that?
Well, I could jump in there. We both have kept journals, and very detailed training logs for our running careers, and have found writing to be a really powerful tool. And especially for Melody, there's some really great examples about visualization and mental training in there. But a really key part of tapping into your potential and overcoming obstacles is strengthening your mind-body connection. And writing is one tool that we can use to do that. And I think each one of these topics is so rich that we could have written a book about each one of these topics, or two. There's so much information and so much emerging information. And so we really wanted to create a space or help girls or their coaches or parents figure out how to synthesize that information and also tune into their own experience. What does hearing about your body, what does hearing about periods, what does hearing about eating disorders trigger in your body, whether it's emotional or a physical sensation, or what have you heard? And so that's just a tool for girls to both synthesize their own experience plus new information, but also look forward and start to think about how to articulate their struggles or their hopes or their dreams. And for me, writing has just been a super powerful tool that I come back to again and again, much like running. And so we wanted to share that as just one of the tools in their toolkit that they can come back to.
It's fabulous. In amongst that, I saw something I've never seen before that I'd like to get some insight, because I could have probably used this myself, and maybe I still need to, but maybe I'm older and wiser now. What is a tantrum journal?
Yeah, well,
You seem to have a reference to a thing called a tantrum journal. I know journaling, and I know confidence journals now, because we just did Strong by Kara Gatcher a few weeks ago. So I have my own confidence journal, but I'm pretty interested to understand this tantrum journal.
So this is a perfect example of a mental skill or tool that you can practice. And it's basically, if you're feeling overwhelmed or super stressed and you don't really know what's going on and you don't really know what to do about what you're feeling, this tantrum journal, you just write whatever's on your mind, whatever's stressing you out really quick. It's like a free write, but a quick condensed version of that. And we borrowed this mental skill from a woman named Kelsey Griffith. And she recommends turning over that piece of paper after you scribble everything that's on your brain, pandemic, racial injustice, homework, training, my foot hurts, whatever it is. I mean, it could be anything, right? There's so much to be stressed about right now. You flip it over.
Yeah, that came too quickly to you, Elizabeth, all those things.
Now you know exactly what I've been tantrum journaling about.
And she obviously has a tantrum journal, and I have a hard time continuing my confidence journal that I started. I guess I need to work on that. The moral of the story.
Well, that's the cool thing. It's like Kelsey Griffith, this mental skills specialist, recommends saying, what can I do to make it 1% better? So for a high school athlete, okay, they're freaking out about finals or whatever, Zoom classes. How do I do that? Find one thing that you can do to make it 1% better. Is that take a nap because you're really tired? Is that finish one tiny little task? Is that ask for an extension? And so it is something that can give you hope and confidence and help you find a way forward. But it's also super freeing just to get it out of your brain and then shred it or burn it or whatever.
So there are many topics in this book. I mean, you really touched, I find that you touched a little bit on everything, just enough to plant the seed to let people know that, this aspect has to be thought about, but you didn't go into super great detail about anything because, I guess it would make the book 3,000 pages. But how did you decide on the topics? Where did that come from?
You were in the guts of figuring that out with our editor.
So it's definitely a team effort because, like I mentioned, you could write a book about every single chapter, every single topic. And Melody, when she would speak at camps and I would hear her talks, and then also the questions that the girls would ask, and the boys as well. We get these questions over and over again as coaches, as athletes. Now I'm a coach, she's a coach, we hear them. These questions don't age out, right? And so we basically sketched out what are the essentials, what are the topics that we need to cover, what are the topics that young runners need to know about, and what are the questions that we've heard over and over again. So we started with that, and it was a pretty long list. And so then as a team with our editors at Velo Press, we were able to kind of narrow that down and choose what we thought was the list of the most important topics that we definitely needed to cover.
Kind of my most enjoyable and most meaningful thing at camp is sitting in a circle and asking the girls questions. What are you bringing to the table? What do you want to know? And I send them a bio, and we would get information ahead of time, but not all by any stretch, because I really think Elizabeth's ever expanding consciousness about all things related added more. But initially it seems like it was just, there were a few topics that were never, they just were, for 13 years, get the same ones. How do I run with a period? How much should I eat? When? How? Is it okay to eat? Those kinds of things. So hopefully in the book there's a nice mix of the facts and the hardcore information to really simply answer those kinds of questions, and also contextualize it with some story.
And give references to other sources of information. In particular, I saw the reference to the National Eating Disorder Association. Food and food issues are not trivial these days, I think. There's so much social media and media in general, and image around the place. Everybody needs help. I noticed reference to a condition that I think Liz is developing as well, called orthorexia.
Yep.
Where you spend the whole training session talking about food and exactly what kind of food that you these are more modern situations that are developing for the adults.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know this was a condition, but so that was one of the things that I learned from the book, which is why I think that even if you're an adult, you can read it, even though it's very much like simple for the, teenagers and a good overview and everything like that. But really, there was a lot of content, and this, orthorexia is basically the obsession with like clean eating. From what I understood, I didn't know that this has become pathological, but I have to say that I see why, because so I'll tell you another story. A few years ago, more than a few years ago now, I was on this quest for a sub 3-hour marathon. So this has been a long time coming. So this year I'm on the quest for the sub 3-hour marathon again, but it started really in I would say around 2013. And so what I had decided to do was I would go and see this nutritionist. And there was somebody that came to speak to our team. And it so happened that it was a guy that met my coach in a locker room at the gym or something. And so he had this business, and he would work with, he said, power and strength athletes, which, I mean, now looking back, I know that that's different, but basically I had decided, okay, well, I want this sub 3-hour marathon. Maybe the pasta is just not what I should be eating every day of the week anymore. And I need to like clean things up and just put all the chances on my side. And I feel like this is probably how it happens for a lot of people. I figured, well, I need to fix this, which might not have been such a problem, but I decided I wanted this sub 3-hour marathon so badly. And this guy came and spoke to us, and he was so convincing that I was like, I'm going to go see him. And what he did was he completely overhauled my whole diet. So no wheat, no dairy, and no corn. So this was the thing. And so I went from eating like pasta and homemade banana bread like every day to eating like salad and protein, which was, chicken or eggs or whatever, all the time. And I was still trying to run like over 100 kilometers a week, which I don't know what that is in miles for you guys, but yeah. So and when I started getting tired, I didn't connect the dots, and it just like I'm very good at following a plan. So like to my detriment. I mean, I can follow a plan. You tell me what to do, I will do it, and I will convince myself that I need to do it. Yeah, it was like 6 months. 6 months I was just really disciplined, and every time I would go see him, he was like, well, your body needs to adapt. And so I would give it more time and more time and more time, meanwhile trying to run all these kilometers and eventually getting injured for the first time in years. But I never, now looking back, I'm like, well, this was so obviously because I overhauled my diet in the wrong way. Yeah, I love that you talk about in that section where you mentioned the orthorexia, you talk about how sometimes as runners, we just need to eat more processed foods to get the calories in. Even now, years later, because I was so good at overhauling my diet, it's really hard to, like, I don't even remember how I was before. So it's hard to go back to what I was before. It's really interesting. Like I look back now, and after reading that section of the book, I'm like, oh, too bad you guys didn't write this a few years earlier.
Have you reached your goal? Have you done a sub 3?
No, not yet. So I'm still, I'm going to attempt again this year.
This is actually a running theme through all of our podcasts now. It comes up, the sub 3 hour goal for Liz. And she's trying to make it into a sub 3 hour goal for both of us.
Because
but
Alan,
I'm a little too far off that.
No, because Alan, ever since he retired, he's been just crushing the workouts. So I'm convinced.
If I may say a couple words about your story and what you said prior, this orthorexia, this is, sorry about the noise, a big machine driving by. So girls' attitudes towards what's good and bad and right and wrong about food usually come, not always, but from their mothers. And so, like you said, boy, I'm not the target audience for this book, but I can sure relate to that. And actually, thanks for your saying that, because it's a great selling point for our book, because I have had so many women tell me that they would like a running camp. They would want, they too need this. And especially in our culture today, moms, young moms, middle-aged moms, are affected by this obsession with healthy eating and stuff. And their girls are just watching what mom is doing, and they're going to go do the same thing and probably take it to another level. And so I wanted to say that, and also, and I'm glad that the book can be a relief and learning information like that. Honestly, I hadn't ever thought yet, Elizabeth, about orthorexia being a big light bulb for adult readers, but that's exciting that it could be. But, I hope you reach your goal, Liz, and you find that using intuitive eating will get you there, and listening to your body. I won't go into a big story, but we make a little reference to a story that I had of a coach trying to impose a fad diet on me at the time that I had the greatest opportunity to reach the highest level I could in the sport. I was training for the Olympic Trials Marathon, and I was really a legitimate contender. I had run one of the fastest times in the country for a half marathon prior to that, 1:11:34. And it's not that fast these days, but back in 1999, it was fast. I had been going on my own journey to find how to listen to myself to eat what I needed. And my coach at the time came and said, no, you need to not combine your carbs with your protein. You should never eat a balanced meal, essentially. And I went into the Olympic trials glycogen depleted. And this was a 180 from 4 months earlier when I qualified for the trials, and all we did was stuff our faces with pasta before the race. And I felt like I could have run 2 marathons that day. I felt so good. My debut marathon, I told my coach how good I felt. She said, oh, it's just beginner's luck. It wasn't. I took care of my body. But yeah, really, when I heard you say you didn't have the sense of a connection to your diet, to not being able to reach that sub 3 hour goal, sadly, I did. I knew what was going on, but I was told that my weakness as an athlete was not listening to trusting enough, not listening and trusting my coach enough. And I thought, well, I'm humbled. I'm going to do what I need to do. And if this is the edge I need, I know I was told that. And so, tough lesson, but yeah, you don't want it to be a tragic loss. I hope you make it.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I've read some articles more geared towards performance, and they all say about about carbs, that endurance athletes need carbs, and because mostly what you're burning at a high intensity is, yes, you're burning fat, but mostly carbs. And it's interesting because at the highest levels of performance, I think that message is out there, but then it doesn't trickle down because, there's always all kinds of people trying to follow like a ketogenic diet or, one of the other diets that are out there, and expecting a different result when it's not really backed up by the science. It's interesting how the information doesn't trickle down. It's like other sports. Sometimes I feel like other sports people will look at the pros and be like, well, I want to be like him, so I'm going to train like him, and I'm going to eat like him, and I'm going to, do everything like this pro person. And in running, it seems to be like, oh, well, Eliud Kipchoge, he eats a lot of carbohydrate rich foods, and the Kenyans, if you read articles, their diets are like 75% carbs. But I think that for me, I need to I don't know, eat a high fat diet to become fat adapted. And it's so strange how in running this seems to like be it's just not the same as in other sports in that way. I don't know if that's something that you guys have found. I don't know if it's really the same with younger athletes, because we're in a club with adults, so we hear what other adults are doing.
I do think that there's so many different sources of information now at all of our fingertips. So there are definitely young athletes that follow professionals that maybe have a feature on Runner's World, like what so-and-so eats in a day. And so some kids glom on to that, or some moms or, dad runners glom on to that. But then there's also so many fad diets. And when we live in a world that's inundated by diet culture, and there are books and there are articles and there are podcasts and professional snapshots, it can be super confusing and overwhelming to figure out what the right information actually is. And I think everybody's confused by that.
Yeah, it saddens me really to hear the story of you as a junior that you've just given us, Melody, and it makes me angry a little bit as well. But it saddens me mostly. I'm immensely proud of the fact that we're talking to you and you're being part of the solution for the future. So that's the counterbalance to that. But I guess what makes me angry is I hear your story, and then I hear the story of Mary Kane, and it's almost like we haven't learned and we've repeated we haven't repeated, we've allowed to repeat the story. And then I see the young girl Caitlin Tui.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you go, oh my God, it's going to happen again, maybe. And I would be proud of you. I'm proud of you in your book. I was proud to see Mary Kane trying to offer advice, I think, to Caitlin Toohey, and eventually a solution will come. But it seems that we're not handling this correctly, and we become aware of it, and we need to have more of this public discussion. And this book is a good contribution to that. To that extent, what advice would you give? I'm thinking, well, who's listening to our podcast? Maybe young runners are listening. Maybe it would be older people, but what advice would you give to young girl runners in a nutshell? What advice would you give to people who are more likely to listen to our podcast, who would probably be parents or maybe coaches? Big question.
Do you want to start or do you want me to?
I can do either. Do you have a hankering or do you want
I'll go for it and you can build. I'll get us rolling.
Okay.
I think for young athletes, especially runner girls, the most important piece of information is to know that it is not natural to have a straight line up. Every single athlete, every single human faces obstacles, and we talk about Melody's journey in the running journey chapter in our book, and we talk about facing these fears and facing maybe a trajectory that doesn't happen on the way that you think it will, or the way that your coach thinks it will, or the way that your parents think it needs to for you to get a college scholarship. And just the reminder for young girls is to zoom out. And this goes for parents and coaches too. And think about the big picture and your why. One meet is not going to make or break you. One bad period that gives you cramps is not going to make or break your running career. Zoom out and have faith that if you're moving in the right direction and listening to your body, you can accomplish amazing things.
Yes. The first thing that came to me when you asked what advice would you give a girl is to trust your own instincts. That's a big statement, but that's one of the reasons that we have the writing experience in our book, is because learning to trust your instincts is a process that develops over time. And I believe that coaches today, and they need to empower girls and boys that this is their journey. It's not their parents, it's not their coaches. It's that running, it must be, and it must come from inside, because if it doesn't, it's not going to last in your life. We need to empower kids as coaches that they are part of the plan. They're the plan creation, that they're part of, and that they're really driving the bus. That the role of a coach is to provide the framework and hold the space. The framework, and give them the knowledge of the training aspects, and teach them about why you do different things. Help them with goal setting and planning the training accordingly, and hold the space for the athlete to, as Elizabeth said, do the peaks and valleys journey. Absolutely, that has to be said up front. You're not going to start out and have a linear path to victory, and that is actually another major motivation for me to be part of this project, is that I was an athlete who succeeded at a very high level very early, and my own expectation, which I'm sure was formed out of the cultural expectation, my familial expectation, was that I would never fail. And it wasn't until I was out of college and that I realized how crazy that is to have, and I think we even say that in one of my little stories in the book. And so I just found myself last night at my youth practice. I had a little tiny speed workout with the kids, 100, 200, 300 times 2, something fun and zippy. And one of the girls, who's 11, who's an intense girl, said, "Can I just not do the 300?" And I know her, so I know exactly why she was asking, because she had an expectation that she would have to better her time from the first set. And I said, "Listen, can we step back from the edge in your mind you're on right now, and just, can you have a different expectation for this interval? Like, can we take to consideration all the factors that this is part of listening to your body, like how much sleep did you have last night? Are you all, so many different pieces, but every coach could not be expected to know what those are for every athlete. So it's on the athlete to know herself. But if she's not told by her coach, her parents from the beginning, you get to go on this awesome ride, this awesome journey of learning who you are. And then once you know that, using that as a guidepost for the actions you take. And so I think that's the advice that I would give a girl, is start in being empowered to do that. And interestingly, I'm in a graduate teaching program right now, and I'm learning about all these different philosophies of education. And there are new schools popping up in public education in America that are really they're like, it's like the postmodern education. They're really trying to change the top-down model of education and make it more collaborative. And it's a big jump, but the collaborative idea of education is, it empowers the student. It puts the student in control. It's less teacher control, which sounds probably kind of scary to some people, but in this day and age, the kids are doing that already. They might as well have the coaches that might as well approach it that way, and might as well create team cultures where they're looking for the next leader and putting the role, putting the work in the hands of their leaders to inspire from within. I think that I'm old enough to be, as I study, I'm realizing I'm just old enough to be of this generation where I sort of am attracted to the top-down model because that's what I grew up with. But I'm just young enough that I've been able to taste that, and now I get a chance to be a coach and a teacher who can actually do that. I think, I guess I sort of, my answer wrapped that includes the parents too.
So what kind of advice would you give to, let's say, a coach that maybe sees something in an athlete that they're worried about? So let's say a coach that is a coach of one of the university teams, that, like the story that I had described at the beginning, where you see that there seems to be a strange unwritten diet culture.
Yeah,
that's
how do you
not
intervene? What's
beneficial.
your
How would you?
intervention
Yeah.
strategy? Or
I can jump in there and say your job is to nip that in the bud, weed that toxic culture out. And whatever it takes to do that is important, but it starts with, I think, one-on-one communication. And that is reliant on a coach having a trusting relationship or an honest communication line with their athletes. Because a coach that's concerned about their athlete, whether they're just eating lettuce or they're out the back door in the workout, is to say, "Hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Are you okay? What's up?" And just opening that door for a conversation and showing concern for an athlete that's beyond their time, that's beyond their weight, that's investing in the human. And I think investing one-on-one and then building a very positive team culture, which we talk about in the Building a Team chapter, just talking about what do you as a runner want in your teammate. Coaches need to be like reinforcing that. And so just dive in and see what you can do to bust the myths, talk about the taboos, and get people that need help. Because coaches we know just enough to be dangerous in all of these different areas, and even experts like we've heard today, like, there's world-class coaches and nutritionists that don't necessarily pass the bar in terms of helping athletes be their healthiest. But coaches need to know when to refer out. So have an RD who has done a dietetics internship, who has an anti-diet approach and understands sports and eating disorders. Have a sports medicine doctor who understands how to treat amenorrhea, et cetera, et cetera. And that puts some responsibility in the coach's lap to try and build their network, but they need to know when to refer out. It's very important.
Real quick, the coach also, NCAA coaches, their job is to win. And they should just know right off the bat that a culture that, Liz, you're talking about with this unspoken diet thing, that's an unsustainable program. They're going to have a program of 1 to 2 year athletes who burn out, get injured, and they're a big liability because they're having stress fracture after stress fracture. So how do we change the coach's mindset that they don't say, oh, good, I have a bunch of skinny girls? That needs to be, oh, no, I have a bunch of girls that are going to be injured and sick.
Is it true that it's a more difficult issue and there are more situations to manage the more elite that it becomes? Because you get into an examination of fine degrees. Just while you're thinking about a response to that, I used to be a soccer coach in Australia, and I used to always ask if I could coach the D team, like not the useless ones, but the less adept naturally adept ones, let's say. And I used to find that was wonderful because you could bring them from very poor to mediocre, and they would be delighted, and they wouldn't argue, this guy's overweight, this guy doesn't run very fast, because they never really had those. They weren't at the pointy end. I used to do some parental management as well. So I'd manage them a little bit and I'd manage the parents. And invariably we'd have successful seasons because we'd never win anything. We never expected to win anything. In fact, my orientation was that, guys, this is what we're going to focus on. We're going to win the cheer at the end of every at the end of every game. We may win the game, we may not. We used to lose 80% of the games. They say we're going to win 100% of the cheers. So we let the other kids do their cheer first, and then we just beat it, whatever it was. If they did it really loud, we'd do it super loud or longer. And that was it. And sort of kind of an easy win. But when you get into you got to come first. You got to be top of the league. You got to be first college. We have a reputation to keep up, etc. Then it becomes more demanding for everyone.
I love hearing that story because on my youth running team, I tell the kids that we want to be the team that's having fun, that cheers the loudest. We created a special cheer last year, and personally, Elizabeth, you answered this in a sec. But I actually, it's interesting. My evolution of coaching has been, I started my camp wanting it to be for elite girls. I think even had the word elite in the title, the name of it. But I quickly learned that there are very few girls that are elite, and my desire was to reach as many girls as I could, and I realized I love that kid that's running number 8 on the team and trying to crack the top 7, and then and that kind of thing. I think that it's so important these days to just, no matter how intense the parents are and the kids, keep emphasizing fun and joy, because even I have had elite, and I do have elite kids on my junior team. They placed in the top 10. I think we had 4 kids that placed in the top 10 in their age group races at nationals last year. But it really, honestly, is just their natural talent and a very strong support at home. Because I think that, yes, what's the term you use? That is, they more elite they get, but by degrees, you get more granular with having to pay attention to all these things. And honestly, I think that the high school coaches in our country, anyway, at least in our environment in Colorado, they are most of their goal is to be at the national Nike cross championships. I mean, they're really training these kids. So I think the kids have enough of that, and they need to be kids as long as they can be kids.
Those are all really, really good points. And I also do think the more elite you get, the higher the stakes. And that model and the incentives that we have for runners at the professional level have been to reward that behavior. So we saw with Mary Cain what the expectations were, right? We know that, it's a very small minority of professional runners who are making enough to like live comfortably. We know that this is a very hard lifestyle. And so we know like socioeconomically, that just puts more pressure on you as well. But we're seeing, I think, a little bit of a shift with non-traditional sponsorships that are rewarding the whole athlete. And we're seeing that Mary Cain just took a full-time position with Tracksmith. Nick Willis did as well. We see Ultra sponsoring Kara Goucher, who's on the trails now, and Alicia Montano. And this is in part to support women who have been punished for having children and penalized and lost wages. Like even Serena Williams lost wages. She's one of the best athletes in the world, and she got pregnant and arguably had way more publicity, and yet still received poor health care and still was, penalized in wages. But I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift, because what is the cost or the price of this pressure? And we saw with Mary Cain that it wasn't worth it. These are lives, these are people. And like Melody said, if you're focusing on fun and joy, not only are you enjoying the experience, but you're having growth as a human. And I personally have seen that my athletes do better when they're in a happy place. They do better when they're healthy. If you break an athlete and they can't run, they're definitely not going to win. So I think we've been going about it wrong.
It sounds obvious, but we've been doing it. It sounds obvious, but we've been doing it wrong for so many years. So we should probably sort of think about our last subject. So Liz, do you have any last questions?
I think I got to ask all my questions. If not, then you ask them. So
I don't want to end on too serious a note, so maybe I should ask for advice about my sports bra. Should I do that? For everybody in our running club here, Liz knows about my sports bra. It's basically 2 Band-Aids. Applied in strategic positions, and it works. It's wonderful. I discovered that many years ago through painful experience. But I was absolutely shocked and amazed to see that the ladies' sports bra has only existed since 1977. That's within my running career, because I'm an old guy. That totally blew me away. I thought it was kind of something that's been around forever, just like ladies have been around forever.
no, and I can say that the sports bras in the last few years have gotten so much better. Like they're stretchy in the right places. I guess you wouldn't know, Alan, but they've gotten a lot better. And you have so many options now, because just maybe like 10 years ago, I mean, you would have basically one model that all the companies kind of recreated, and it just looked like basically like a short t-shirt that was really tight, and you tried to get the tightest one so that nothing moved around.
Do you have any last comments you'd like to make for the book? The book's not out yet. It releases on August the 11th.
August 11th.
So if this podcast hasn't gone out by then, it'll be available, but perhaps we'll get the podcast out just ahead. So the release date's August the 11th. Do you want to make any final comments on the book in general?
Well, I'd love to jump in and just say thanks so much for letting us talk about it. It's so fun. It's been a labor of love. And so we're so excited to be able to share it with everybody. And it's actually available for pre-order now on Velo Press's website, which is really exciting. And we're just so happy to be able to talk about it and use it as a starting point for these conversations.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to share our journey with the book and our personal journey. It's you all do this out of a labor of love, obviously, and I just want to emphasize, for someone on the other end, it's a true gift of the Spirit to give people an opportunity to share their story, and I hope that you have great success with this. You have a really nice style of working together and being very personal, but very focused at the same time. So thanks.
Thank you. Usually we give some overview of the book in terms of when we don't have the authors on, we give it scores out of, if you've listened to any of our podcasts. Liz, do you want to comment on the book?
Well, I mean, I really wish I had this growing up, even though having it now is pretty good, because I did learn a few things, or at least it kind of pointed me in the direction of learning a few things while reading it. And yeah, I think it's really a must read for female athletes or young women, but definitely if if you have an athletic teen in your life, I think this is such a great introduction to all kinds of topics, from physiology to eating disorders, and it's like team culture, gear, even the just being able to read about what kind of gear you really need. I love that you guys broke it down into like, you need this, and this is like a nice to have. So it's really such a great resource, I think, for young athletes, and wish I had it.
And I think I would just add, I echo all of that. It's clearly directed to teen, young girl runners, and the wording and the style of the book is like that. But I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, and that it gives insights for male runners. The people you're running alongside increasingly are female runners. There's more and more. Males are becoming a minority in the sport. And it gives insight into understanding the sorts of challenges that are specific to girl runners. And it's good advice for coaches as well. I might just stretch the elastic a little bit and just say to any coaches out there, it's a matter of how much you've been getting it wrong, rather than are you getting it right. That's kind of me just trying to poke the coaches to say, we need change, and we need more change, and we need faster change, and we need to serve people better. In this day and age, we've seen a lot of recognition of the need for change in different environments, and I think this is just one more. So I thank you again for being part of the solution to that, and for writing this book. And I wish you every success with it and with your coaching or writing careers ongoing. So thanks for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. This has been Girls Running, available through Velo Press, and thanks to Velo Press for putting us in touch with Melody and Elizabeth. If you'd like to give us any feedback, you can find us on our social media. Facebook is at Running Book Reviews. Instagram is at Running Book Reviews. And Twitter is at Reviews Running. But you can find us anywhere. Please leave us a note, leave us a comment, get in touch, have a chat. We'd love to hear from you. Or you can just subscribe to the podcast through your normal podcast favorite streaming platform. We thank you for your attention and look forward to joining with you again soon for another episode.
Thank you.